Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
No, but we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abi.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
I like how you always just figure we'll start and there's no strategy to anything. And you're just like, oh,
I feel so comfortable with you though.
But wait,
Same girl, same.
what is yours like though? If you're going to start, you pre-think.
I
You
pre-think
have
of
a
something like, do I
plan.
have something that sounds funny and how am I going to lead into this?
I know, and they're always really
maybe a little
good.
story.
Oh.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
cute. I don't ever. I'm just like, let's jump and we'll see what happens.
So you're not talking about welcome. You're just talking about like, let's have a story that's totally unrelated.
Yeah.
Like, let's get something that gets the blood flowing.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of foreplay for the podcast.
My favorite part.
My favorite part. Oh my gosh.
Podcast foreplay.
Well,
Hey,
you guys can.
Speaking of
You guys
podcast
can hear.
foreplay.
I'm gonna keep cutting you off. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
No, you go.
You didn't have
So
anything
intrigued
after
where
that.
this is going.
Well, you guys can hear that we have guests on our podcast today, and we're so
That's going to be the
excited.
intro. Yes.
All right.
You guys can hear it. If you don't know, this is Aaron and Jenna Zint. We've had Jenna on several times in the podcast before. She just was on recently talking about ADHD and habits and how to create good habits. She's been in the past about how to create intentional connecting parties or events.
I think
or
there's
fun.
two. There's fun
Fun.
and then intentional connection. I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
So find all the ones from her. But today
Oh.
we have her husband joining us, which I'm very, very excited about.
I like this guy.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Pew, pew, pew.
You stole my line.
I like this guy.
Yep. That's what's going to be in our vows when we renew 25th year.
And
I
I
like this guy.
you.
Honestly, like is sometimes harder than love.
That's
Yeah.
so true.
A
So
few years
true.
into marriage. But you guys teach marriage courses and are incredible parents and do coaching. And so we're really excited. I brought you on specifically because I saw a post that Jenna made about a phrase that she uses with her kids, which I'm going to butcher. But it's like, just because you're sad doesn't mean I'm bad, or just because.
You can connect with the sad and it doesn't mean you're bad.
Or Aaron, what's the other option?
I can be sad and it doesn't mean anyone else is bad.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's so good. So you guys, I saw it on social media. I shared it we teach a masterclass for life consultants. And so we have a 3-year program that people are going through. And I was talking about it in that as we were talking through shame, and all of them were like, oh my gosh, that's so good. And I wanted to bring you guys on to actually talk about that concept because it's very rare. I think most of us like to blame people in our pain or want to deflect from listening and caring about people's experiences because we think they're saying we're bad. And you guys implement it a lot in parenting. And oh my God, if we could get people to do this in parenting and change the world. So do you guys just want to talk about your own journey with this and how that started?
I want to start with how it all started was we've been trying to teach our kids like to be more aware of their feelings and emotions and like letting them safely express them without shutting down.
That's so good.
So in it, my older daughter, 9, was trying to listen to our 6-year-old, and she was like just flooded with defensiveness and wanted to like tell Rosie why she was wrong and that she wasn't bad. And I was like, I like pulled her out of the hallway for like a quick like powwow because you can't do it in front of them. And I like said, it was funny. I said it, you can connect with her sad and it doesn't mean you're bad. And then I was like, oh, this rhymes. And anything that, so then we started, she's like, oh mom, that's good. So then we started chanting, you can connect with their sad and it doesn't mean you're bad. You connect with their, so I'm not a rapper, but I teased it as like, it's kind of a rapper. But then the irony, so then it was like cool to use it. And of course it's not one like instant. You know how you think you get a discovery, you're like, great, this is going to change our family. And you're like remembering how to use it. But then the irony is how much more I use it. And now it loops in my head when Aaron and I are processing, like, I'm like, I thought it was for the kids, but really it's for me. Cause I made a loop of like, when the defensiveness is like, my walls are starting to come up and be like, no, you connect with the sad and it doesn't mean you're bad. You connect with the sad.
Do you wrap it in your
you
head?
hear it in your head?
100%, guys. Other people might not be honest, but I do.
This is new information to Aaron. Completely.
Yeah, I did not know
There's
while
gang
I was
signs.
talking, she's rapping
I have ADHD. What do you think's happening in here?
a whole lot.
Yeah.
And then it was as as we started working and trying to teach some of this stuff in the marriage classes, we were realizing how difficult it is to not be defensive and through all of it. So we're like saying this stuff. And then as we're saying this, I don't know if this happens to you guys, but when you're teaching something, you're like, oh, I should probably live this.
No, we've never had a moment like that.
What?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So we're like in the kitchen and Jenna starts telling me, she's feeling lonely about something. And everything inside me is like, woo, starts rising up and getting big. And I was like, oh, this is one of those times. Because I could think of the class that we were teaching. And I was like, I'm going to have to tell this story next week. So be awesome right now.
Be awesome. So if you want to grow, just teach a class.
Yeah, it was really helpful.
Accountability.
So I just started looping the same thing. Like, you can connect to her sad. It doesn't mean you're bad. And it's part of that. Then I have all these other things like, this isn't about you, Aaron. This isn't about you. This is not about you. And so I can just start to like ease. I feel all my claws start like kind of retracting, as I hear her. And even though it's still like my whole nervous system is still like on guard, I can feel it start popping up. Just another loop of this isn't about you. It doesn't mean you're bad. You're not bad. Actually, you're not on trial now. We have a lot of different phrases that we use. And so start pulling back even more. And then by the end of it, Jenna feels super heard. And also I'm like, oh, wow, that was way easier and quicker than when I go, yeah, I know you're sad, but I didn't actually
do that,
etc.
I think for me, what I realized, I guess 3 levels down, is it's kind of dealing with the anxiousness that you feel when you hear someone else's pain and thinking of the implications of like, are they making statements about me or the pieces of information they don't know? So this, like, I would actually feel almost like anxious of wanting to explain or justify
everything.
Yeah. So that it's almost like a comfort of like, hey, this actually isn't about you right now. Like, you can actually listen with your ears on because it's not about you. So if anything, it almost helps me like let the anxiousness recede. And the idea of like, you'll get a chance to talk. It's not going to be one-sided forever. But in this phase, your goal is just to listen really well.
One question I have right here. Have you guys adjusted even how you approach sharing your feelings? And what I mean by that is like, it's very easy to come with an approach of accusation and blame inside of you already, like, versus like, hey, I'm here to tell you about me. And so this phrase is pretty easy to implement because I'm actually not aiming bullets at you.
This is actually why I was like, man, I did that so well. I was really proud of myself after this initial time. But then I thought about it a little deeper and I was like, oh, that's because Jenna didn't actually blame me for any of that.
Right.
And I realized, so, you can have a couple different options where you use this tool really well. And the person is blaming or the person's not, and you can use it really well, but one of them is way, way, way easier. And so that's real. I realized how I was like, oh, Jenna did such a good job using the other side of that phrase, which is I can be sad and it doesn't mean he's bad.
Yes.
And so so as we've used this a lot, it actually helps me step in and go, I'm about to tell you something that really has nothing to do with you, but you're involved. I feel sad. I feel lonely. You did do this thing. But this is mine. Like I'm taking ownership for it, and I don't need. This is what the biggest part for us is like changing. Here's what I need out of this. I need you to admit you're guilty. I need you to admit you're at fault, and I need an apology of some sort.
I need you to take all responsibility for all of my feelings.
Right. I actually can't be okay unless you do these things.
Yes.
And so approaching it with, I can be okay when you step into this pain with me just to help me feel known. Like that's all I want is just to not be alone in it. And then when she's with me in that, I go like, that feels good. And the logistics part of this problem seemed to be easier to manage if there's something to manage
completely,
or it's totally gone. Cause I'm like, all I really wanted was just her to know that I was feeling lonely. And then I was actually good after that.
Yeah. It's hard though, because I think when you start the emotional health journey, you want to blame someone for all of your pain. I think this is one of the most common human. This is technically how Hitler got so much momentum, is because they wanted to
create a villain.
He created a villain for why they were in pain. We're in pain because the Jews are doing this. And I think that this is a very, very common human thing, because if we can have blame, and people do it, we either blame ourselves or we blame others. And basically, I think the subconscious belief is if I blame you and I can control you, I can get the pain to stop. Or if I blame you and I can leave you, I can get the pain to stop. Or if I blame me, I can control me to get the pain to stop.
Yeah.
And so most of us are looking on how do we minimize the pain instead of actually embracing the pain, which automatically minimizes it. It's counterintuitive.
So counterintuitive.
Healthy decisions are so often counterintuitive until you retrain your system and then they become more natural to you. But the concept of I can have pain and it doesn't mean you're bad is very hard to teach yourself.
Yeah. That feels like that's one of the biggest things for me to realize. At one point I was in pain. It was around something Jenna did. However, I was like, oh, she didn't actually do anything wrong. And then I was looking around, I was like, well, who did something wrong? Because this is the natural reaction. I was like, it was nobody. And it was where these have been sinking in at different levels.
Yes.
And so that was a moment for me. I was like, I didn't realize that I can be in pain and no one sinned.
Yeah.
Like this, it just happened. And it gave me some freedom to just allow myself to go, it was a good self-compassion, self-regulation kind of moment, but also to go, no blood needs to be shed for this, like this pain right now, which is usually what I need in order for, I need the sacrifice on the altar in order to feel okay.
I do think that, like you were saying, Justin, though, like before we got to this point of like, not blaming in our emotions, we did go on a journey of like being in touch with our emotions and then trying to send the message really well, but we kept getting caught in the receiving and how much defensiveness would be like, we did it so well and still feeling defensive. And we realized that like we had this expectation that we could do the sending the message so well that the other person would not, like when you did it perfect, they wouldn't feel triggered or feel defensive. So then I must have done something better. But then realizing like, oh, actually, I can still manage my response. I think of it like when I'm flooded with defensiveness. Sometimes I think of it like when he's talking, like being cold water being poured down my head. And I'm like, I feel it. I feel the But then like, oh, just because I feel it doesn't mean I have to engage with it. And I still have a choice. So the idea of like not waiting for me to not feel defensive to not communicate defensively. Yeah. Like I can still hear him and I'm going to self-regulate while I'm in it. So the expression helps me that. I think though, the idea of like, when we've arrived, we won't feel defensive anymore. Like I actually can still choose my emotions and my reactions, even when I do feel defensive, you know?
Yeah. Because when we've arrived, it doesn't mean we're not human anymore. And I still want my nervous system to be on guard when it needs to be. So I don't want to actually turn that off. I just want to be able to go, hey, my smoke detector is going off, but it's actually a candle, not a stove fire.
That's a great
analogy.
So what was I was just had some. Oh yeah. I was part of this.
I got happy that I was like, yeah, he's smart.
It was a good. That was a really great. It was like a mic drop moment. I think both me and Justin were like, yeah.
And that's what I was doing for myself. I was like, wow, good job, Aaron.
Stroked his beard. You couldn't see that.
But we've been talking about this idea of like a defenseless listener. Like it has a very negative connotation when you say it, but like I want to create a defenseless listener in her, meaning I want to not put her on the defensive, but then as the defenseless listener, it was the other day we were talking about helping some married couples work through this same thing where they're just like constantly defending themselves. Nobody feels heard. And the guy that Jenna was talking to was like, but the thing she's saying, Jenna's like, she's not going to do it well, probably. So you have to be ready to approach with this. And he goes, but it's so hard. And she's like, yeah, self-control is really hard. Like, it was like, this is self-control. And like, honestly, being like Jesus is really hard in this specific thing right here. Cause I had this, was thinking of Jesus in front of Pontius Pilate, didn't defend himself.
Yeah.
Could have. But what I was trying to tell this guy is, hey, good men don't need defending.
Yeah.
So whenever I feel that defensiveness come up, naturally because I feel like somebody's accusing me.
Yeah.
But also if I had this thing inside of me that was like, oh yeah, but you're actually, you're not bad, right?
Yes.
You don't actually have to, there's not something to defend there because like good men don't need defending and good women don't need defending.
I think I had to settle that for myself is actually breaking up with shame for myself because I realized that I would get it's almost like if defensiveness is a volume control, it would be turned up way louder if I already had my own shame in the background noise. So me like actually practicing like, hey, you're not wrong, you're not bad. Like that was probably my first step before is actually like, you're not bad. You're not bad. Because I would like get so triggered and like I'd call them shame spirals.
Yeah.
And then in the irony, because then I would take on all of what they said. Like I was that. I then couldn't listen to them well and then become about me. And Aaron like would leave the conversation comforting me when he was the one with the pain, but I just would get so triggered. So being able to like listen and deal with like, okay, you actually know you're not bad. Yeah. You're not a villain. So settling that question so I could turn my ears back on, I guess.
Yeah, I think this is something I've been going on the journey of the past few years. I grew up in Christianity and there was such and also in the world. So it's not even really religion or not, but there's such a, are you good or are you bad?
Right.
And there's like two buckets that people, and people are terrified that if they do a certain amount of wrong things, that means they're bad, or they try to do enough good to make sure that they're good. And that is such a black and white way of thinking, and it's not accurate for anyone. And I started noticing this because I was doing it with other people. I was trying to figure out, are you good or bad? So should I be friends with you or not? Like, and then also on the inside, feeling this constant, does that make me bad? Does that make me bad? So if Justin confronts me about something and I'm scared that could make it so that I'm now bad.
It's another vote another drop in that bucket.
Yeah. So then I definitely don't want to take ownership for anything,
which makes it really hard.
That could mean I am now having more bad drops. Yeah. And so I let go of, because I was like, it really isn't a bucket. Because then at what point, there's no way for us to have like you're allowed to lie 5 times, but if you lie 7.9 times, then you're in the bad. But like, there's no way for us to fully measure that. So I gave up on good or bad, and I landed with, we all have healthy, like constructive and destructive behavior, all of us. And we are constantly ebbing and flowing in that behavior. And there's things that we can do that feed constructive behavior, and there's things that we can do that feed destructive behavior. But it's never that we all of a sudden become a destructive person or we all of a sudden are an only constructive person. We're all of the things. And I think accepting humanity for me was what is helping me let go of the bad idea. Because I have to accept, no, I am going to make mistakes, and I am messy, and I am going to hurt people, and misunderstandings do happen. Yeah. The more I've accepted, like, I'm going to affect people negatively, and that doesn't mean I'm now in the bad bucket. Yeah. No, I'm going to do something that hurts somebody. That's actually what it is to be human. And even if all my intentions are right and I'm trying my hardest, I can still negatively affect somebody. And as long as I was trying to not be human and not ever do those things, it made me angry when people misunderstood me.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask something. My observations of you, Abby, I mean, we both have dealt with levels of that, right? In my observation, like when you would take ownership for something, if I immediately was like, yeah, that really did hurt me, I felt like there was a lot of resistance that I was met with. And so one of the things that I began to implement was, I started acknowledging how vulnerable that must have really been for you and how close I actually felt to you when you shared stuff like that versus like creating more distance in a time of vulnerability. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, that must have been really vulnerable. That means the world to me. I really feel close to you that you shared that with me. And
that you owned that you did that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was curious, how did that affect you potentially? I don't know. I've never asked you this, but how has that affected your process?
Well, you automatically feel less defensive when you feel like somebody is like being thankful for how you do it. And I think anytime you reward behavior, it makes it safer to do the behavior more.
Right. And did you feel like it helped reinforce that you're not bad at an unconscious level at all?
Yeah. I actually do think it was really helpful.
Because one of the things that I realized,
would you like a pat on the back?
Let me turn around and give you a shoulder. Go for it. No, I think.
No, it was a really helpful thing.
Yeah, because I think that even in those conversations, it's very easy for when we have shame for a message to be sent, especially if someone says, hey, I totally effed this up. And they're like, yeah, you did. Let me tell you why. And like, because they're in pain and they want to express the reality of that pain, it can push back into that defensive bucket of like, oh, nope. Okay, apparently I am bad. And you're going to reinforce that. So I really don't want to hand over ownership. I don't want to actually extend this idea of like, oh, I want to take ownership here because you're just going to reinforce that how bad I really was. And so I began to try and be really careful about that. So I was just curious how that affected you and if that was something.
Yeah, that's great. Do you guys have any stories of either with your kids or with yourself where this has played out or where you've taught through this?
Stories. Actually, even just me, for like what Justin was asking you about, how he swapped with Aaron. I think I did have to settle though that I'm not bad. Like I can like that had to be settled, and then he reinforced it. But like it was something I had to settle.
Can't do that for you.
Right.
It was like an identity piece that I was like, oh, okay, you're not bad. But then he would remind
I do want to just jump in on that. One of the things both of you have said is a very common emotional health practice that not everybody does, which is self-talk and narration while you're in a moment. Yeah. So you actually saying when you feel, I love the picture of the glass of cold water being poured on you, like defensiveness, you actually saying to yourself, you are not bad. Like this can be happening and you're not bad and you can choose out like that. You can actually self-talk is like reparenting. It's like helping yourself make it through an event. And it's really important. Your self-talk, you're doing it whether you think you are or not.
100%.
Yeah,
so you're either like, they are the worst. How could they say this? How dare they do this? Or you're like, it's okay. You're doing good. You're, you know, so I just wanted to point that out because you've done a great job of explaining that.
Oh, thank you. It's funny. Sometimes you talk and I forget to like think about what I'm saying next. I'm like, I'm like, oh wait, this isn't just a conversation. But with, so when Aaron would do that, like when we were just getting almost like, it feels like new ground. Like when I was like, hey, I just got out of the shame spiral. So one of the things he would help me with is tell me how he needed me to show up, but in a kind way. So that would look like, I had some pain today. I wanted to share with you. Like, I think I just want to be known or want some comfort up front before I got into any logistics. It would actually, it almost felt like a car. Be like, oh, okay. He's probably telling me this because it's probably going to be involving me. And I'm probably going to feel like I'll ask him, okay, like give me a second. And I'll think through like, I'm probably going to feel defensive. I can choose to do something about that. I care more about being a safe spot for Aaron than partnering with my defensiveness. And I know that even if I feel anxious, I'll get a chance to share if I'm misunderstood later. I actually just I want to be that spot of comfort for him. So how can I show up for that well? But just by simply being like, hey, this is what I'm looking for. I'm like, okay, go. and not doing it
You're in a different posture.
Yeah, a total different posture. But then I also think sometimes I had thought I made all these realizations and got all the self-talk, then I would just stay in that gear for the whole conversation. But how often I would be like, no, I didn't. Oh, that must have been so hot. Like, I would have to, I think sometimes
like catching myself
and going back. Yeah. I think there's this expectation if you know, then you're going to use it well and do it perfectly. And you're like, no, I'm going to be practicing for the rest of my life probably. And that with giving him grace and me grace to self-correct. There's literally times in our conversations where I'm like, oh, can I try that again? And it's almost like probably 2 sentences later when he's starting to get defensive. I'm like, that's interesting. And I'm like, oh, you didn't deliver that real well, Jenna. Like, let me try if I can do that again. If we can, it's almost like a choose your ending with the story. Like, will we end up somewhere else? You know? So the idea, like, I want to be a spot for comfort for him, but also too, like, I care about us as a team. And if our goal is connection, then us being as helpful for that mutual goal as possible is winning. It's not Jenna getting a chance to defend herself before she hears all of Aaron. It's not a case. It's not a trial. It's like a mutual goal.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of the first story that comes to mind was our kids. We're in the car. Our middle daughter, Rosie, wanted to tell jokes at her school performance.
Oh, so cute.
She's in kindergarten and she literally was like, I'm the kindergarten comedian. And I was like, I love you so much.
Really adorable. And then she got sick on the day of the performance. Couldn't do it. But plot twist, we had her do kindergarten twice so she would get the chance. The kindergarten solely
twice
for
is
that.
true.
We knew there'd be scouts in the audience. So So she gets a second chance to do this, but you have to audition. So she goes to the audition, does it. It was great. She's in the back of the car one day and we're like, hey, Rosie, the performance is coming up where you get to tell her your joke. She's like, but I already did it. We're like, oh, that was the audition. And then suddenly she bursts into tears and you guys lied to me. And we're like, both of us are like, what is happening right now? She's like, you lied to me. And so when my kid, this thing happens in me, when my kids get really big and angry, like my anger surfaces real fast. I'm feeling tons of stuff. I'm super defensive. We're both like, Rosie, we did not lie to you because we know for sure we did. Yeah, we're like, I never told you this. So anyways, it was at one point we realized
we're defending.
We're like arguing with her. She's crying. And then I don't remember how it happened. We're like, oh, wait. There's like pain behind this like logistical problem.
It was you. That was sweet. You were trying to not take credit for it.
I honestly didn't remember. I didn't remember.
I was like, I didn't lie, you 5-year-old.
So ready to fight her. And so, yeah, we stopped. We're like, okay, there's something here. And the like, oh, actually, I'm not on, my goodness, me being a liar is not actually on trial here. Like, I know that's not the case, even though I was defending myself. And then we're like, hey, what's happening right now? What's happening for you with this? And I think that's what sparked it was this idea where we go, oh, we don't actually need to defend ourselves because we're not on trial. Like there's more happening here. So it allowed, I think that is what turned off our, it's either like contempt or curiosity in these moments. So I was immediately in some contempt towards her because I was feeling contempt my way. Yeah. And so Jenna
that's a great example. We often respond with what we're feeling towards us.
Yeah.
So you felt contempt from her. You wanted to respond back in contempt.
She's throwing grenades. I'm throwing grenades. And Jenna's tendency was to like just lob a grenade inside her own bunker, self-contempt.
I didn't do it towards other people very often.
Yes. I love lobbing. So we go, what's happening? And then we realize she begins to explain, I thought my dreams came true already. Oh. And they didn't. And that was what was so devastating. And suddenly Jenna and I are like, oh, this has nothing to do with me and her being liars. Like this has everything to do with she's in so much pain. And then we could get on that level with her and comfort.
I think at this point we have so much proof of they can be sad and it doesn't mean I'm bad that I can believe it. Even if it doesn't, like when you're in the thick of it and then like you can't see the forest for the trees, you're like, no, I know this to be true enough. So then when you have those aha moments, you're like, oh, it's so easy to choose compassion, like, and meet you in this. So then further fuel for the next time. And then some of the, this one time I was doing carpool. Wait,
hold on before you do that.
Yeah.
So then what'd you do?
So then it's just validate, comfort, help her regulate. So like, oh, wow, that if I thought my dreams came true and they didn't, like that would be so hard. Totally. Like, are you feeling sad? We started just naming the emotions. Are you feeling sad? Yeah, I'm feeling sad. Do you feel hurt? Do you maybe feel scared it's not going to happen? Yeah, all these things, And then we're like, oh, that would be really hard. So we just literally were like, yeah, I would feel that same thing too. Yeah. And then she was like, switch.
Totally.
It was like shocking how quick. Yeah. And then I think eventually we're like, hey, good news. It's Friday. She's like, cool. But like if we had tried to be like, it's Friday, we were saying the same things when she was triggered and, she couldn't hear it.
Totally.
So it wasn't the problem.
That's great. Okay. Give us another story.
Our kids are in the backseat after pickup and they like the two girls were fighting and our son who's 4 was in between them. He's actually 3 at this point. And Rosie hit Audrey and then Audrey was in pain and she was mad at her and Wesley goes, you could connect with your pain and it doesn't mean she's bad. And I was like, well, okay, this has got a different pain, but I was like, he's winning. We were winning.
He's starting to get
closer.
it.
He's hearing it and he's 3. We got a ways to go. But even with the kids, like just practicing that, like when they have hurt each other and be like, hey, can you it sounds like Rosie's really sad because she wants to play with you. And I get that you have all these reasons of how she'll mess up your Legos or the art project you're doing. But like we usually have to pull them out. It's hard for them to regulate in front of each other.
Doubt.
I think that's really wise.
So then like just talking through, and even if like they are not able to engage with compassion yet, still like going back and be like, hey, you're really sad. I'm sorry you're sad. I don't want you to be sad. And the idea that they don't have to necessarily change their behavior. They're just making room for their emotions is, and just reminding us that we can do it 10,000 times. And eventually this will be who we are. We're like, investing in their, what is it, like the culture of our family.
Well, and on that note, I think that that's something that a lot of people don't get, whether it's in marriage or whether it's with kiddos. I mean, we don't have kiddos, but I can relate even in marriage, like paying a price up front that feels like, oh, this is taking all of my time and all of my energy.
Yep.
But the long-term payoff is so much greater because, like you said, now you've established a culture within the relational dynamics of the family or a one-on-one relationship within a marriage, where it's like, oh, our norm has now completely changed and we're not getting caught in like the murkiness and the mud of constantly having the same fight for the next 25 years.
Yeah. That's so good.
Because that's when you get focused on the problem instead of the pain that's behind the problem.
Yeah.
You just keep hitting this problem over and over again, and you think you're geniuses for attacking the problem, and all the pain is behind it, and it just keeps surfacing. And it's like a whack-a-mole thing.
Completely.
Until you actually take care of the mole, the problem's just going to keep surfacing. Which, speaking of that, like one of the stories around this is around our sex life for sure. Like I felt so much pain over the last 15, how long? Yeah, 15 years. Is it 15?
14, I think.
Okay, it doesn't matter. Yeah, long time. Around these moments where I would want sex, try to initiate or something around that. And Jenna, just thinking about her, she's like, oh no, we're doing this. She somehow would not give in to whatever I was hoping would happen. even and especially because most of the time I was doing it very, very subtly.
Maybe she didn't know.
She had no idea ever. Is what I'm trying to say.
Shut down and rejected, and I'm like, I missed something. I'm not sure.
So we were planning to have sex at this on Saturday. We had scheduled a time, and then I could see the night before that Jenna had scheduled this block of hey, let's plan these trips and do these things. And it was during that time, and I'm just my heart was just breaking in that moment.
No.
And it was all this, see, she doesn't care, the narrative kind of stuff. See, she doesn't care, all the blah, blah, blah. And then the next morning, she had texted me oh, hey, do you want me to bring our stuff so we can have sex and whatever, the sex stuff. And I was like,
the sex stuff. Everyone's like, what's the sex stuff?
That sounds like crap. I know. It's a huge bin. There's so much.
Yeah. All the costumes. Oh my gosh.
So she asked, do you want me to bring this stuff that can fit in a backpack?
And do you want lunch?
Yeah.
That's very practical.
And I was like, why would she even ask that? That would mean if I said no, that would mean we're not. So I've got all these things, and I'm just so
building
bummed.
a case.
And he probably just texted me back, yes.
I did. Yeah. And so I feel all that, and then I suddenly realized okay, what did she actually do just now? Okay, she literally scheduled something, and she asked me a question. And so I have this whole narrative in my head based on all these things that I'm extrapolating from it. And I was like, oh, okay, wait a second. I'm in pain right now. She didn't actually say any of these things or do any of these things wrong. And so it was a bit of, I started doing the self-talk, okay, I feel alone. I feel sad. I feel fear. This isn't going to happen. I feel hurt.
I feel horny.
Very horny and all by myself. And so then as I was oh wait, what if this was totally different? What if Jenna wasn't the villain here? And what if she was oh, hey, I actually really want to make sure that we attack this stuff, but I know that sex is important. So I'm going to schedule it here knowing that we can get around. I just started flipping the script, telling a different story.
What could be her good intentions?
Yeah. What if I cast her in this really positive light and she actually feels all the things I want her to feel towards me? And then by the time I was just kind of rehearsing this in my head. And since I was already making stuff up about her, I figured I might as well make
it nice.
Yeah, make it nice.
Yes.
So then she showed up and I felt connected. I was already connected to her when she showed up versus our normal has always been she would show up, have no idea why I was moody. I wouldn't even fully know, except I'm just positive that she doesn't care about our sex life.
Yeah.
And so just this, it was like a baseline of, I know she doesn't care. And I'm just kind of sad. I wish this stuff would change. Maybe she should go meet with Abby and figure this out. But this time I was totally connected. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot she's actually on my side the majority of the time. So
yeah,
that was
it's a big thing.
It's a great story.
Learning how to give people benefit of the doubt and remember their nature, because our brains naturally, as soon as we get triggered, as soon as an emotion comes up, some kind of fear or hurt or pain, our brain, I think, automatically villainizes. I think this is what our minds are meant to do in triggers.
Yeah.
If we think about primal brain from way back in the day, like you see a lion, your brain is meant to immediately decide threat, run. Like you aren't meant to think through 25 steps between there. You're supposed to be able to see a threat and have instant action against the threat. Unfortunately, our brains don't differentiate, like you said, a candle burning versus a house burning down.
Yeah.
And so now we have that instant threat, and we often go to dehumanizing the person that is across from us and being like, of course they're doing this because they da-da-da-da-da-da. And we just, the frustration, and we lose remembering them as a human. And that, the discipline, we have a friend who does this every time they confront us. Before they confront us, they make a list of everything we've done to, like, not everything because that'd be long, but a list of things, of ways we've loved them well.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
And what it does is it gets them in a heart posture that's relational. So they're coming with less blame and more curiosity, because I imagine you were able to then have a conversation.
I could actually ask her like, hey, so you scheduled all this stuff? And she's like, oh yeah. Like, remember you said you wanted me to bring all this up during that time? I was like, oh.
But the cool part is because I knew that I knew that it was just about his pain, because I would have been like, I know this is a big trigger for you. Let me tell you quickly. Like I would have interrupted him and then he wouldn't have felt no. But then the flip side is he told me all the ways that he imagined what I was like. And I was like, I feel so loved. Yeah, that's true. That's how I do think of you and show up with you. Okay. One of the things too, this has worked for me, is that helping. I think of it like when, like you're telling something, like you're communicating with someone, it's like a tennis match where like, I'm always going to choose how I serve it to them. But like oftentimes if you're communicating with someone who doesn't have the same tool set or value, like you can't control how they're going to send it back to you. And I think a lot of times
that's a great analogy,
because like a kill shot, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's
and then
smart.
I'm like, but I'm like, I always get to hit it softly back because I know that it's almost like actually, like you said, counterintuitive. That's actually self-protection, is because I want to help them love me well as best as I can. So, and my mom does not have the same, like she's a tool set that we do. So when she comes to visit, an awareness of like how she's communicating with the kids, and she doesn't get triggered as much by us because our brains are fully formed, but our kids are not. And she brought all these, like she's a former teacher, so she had all these art projects, and she wanted them to be done specifically. It's not as much a kid art, it's like grandma and kid art. And my kids are very much color outside the line people, and I was overhearing her getting more and more worked up. And so anyways, I asked her to step out. I was like, hey, like what's going on? And heard it. So then I went and chatted with her kids and like, hey, grandma is feeling, did you notice that she started getting more like upset? And they're like, yeah, she's getting mean. And I was like, well, she was actually sad because she was really excited about doing the project this way. And it's not happening because, like you're wanting to paint it differently, which is okay. You actually can paint it differently. That's fine. But like, do you think you could connect with grandma being so excited about dreaming of doing this project with you and then being sad when it didn't get to happen the same way? And they're like, oh, and I sometimes will use examples that they can relate to. Like, do you remember when you wanted to build the Lego thing and Rosie wanted to go off script and you're like, no, we have to do it the way the directions say. So then asking and then telling them to like, hey, like, I was like, you sound really frustrated and I appreciate how well you're trying to love on my kids. And then just explaining some things and then having them back in and like Audrey prepping her.
What would you explain? Maybe
explain like, it's okay for, I think I'm okay with like, or do you think it would be okay for them to color it differently than you were expecting? Like, do you think you could still find connection in doing it together if it's different? Like, and then even asking her more questions, like curiosity rather than like, probably from old childhood triggers being like, I know why she's doing all this and assigning a ton of trigger and then going to like self-protection mode versus like being curious and finding out that, what was it? One of the things that she was saying was, just her idealism, how like she wanted it to be them to be proud of it so that she had this idea that it was going to go up in our garage for forever. And I was like, in
her garage or
our garage?
Oh yeah, that would never happen.
But this idea of if I hadn't asked more questions, I'm like, oh, okay. So instead of going to like, oh, that's unrealistic or whatever, like, oh, she had really high expectations and she didn't communicate them. But like, I can relate to having unvocalized expectations and getting derailed and having so much hope of how I'm going to love you well. And you're thwarting me from loving you well.
Yeah.
So just able to connect with empathy for her and then be like, I don't think the kids aren't trying to reject your love. Like they actually enjoy spending time with you. I think you both would enjoy your time more if you were able to let them paint it this way instead of the way. So trying to help her see their perspective, and then brought her back in, and Audrey was like, Grandma, I'm sorry you're sad. It makes sense that you were really excited about the project and we wanted to color it differently. But then the cool part is they still got to color it the same way.
How did your mom respond when your daughter apologized?
She was like, okay, thanks. It wasn't it wasn't this Hallmark moment. Yeah. But she was like, she was regulated. She wasn't triggered anymore. And they actually finished it without her being aggravated or agitated. Like they finished which would not have probably happened.
No.
So it was cool. And she was like, thanks. Yeah, I am excited to do this. I was really excited about it. So it was cool of the idea of like, you can always control, and then teaching the kids how to like, you always get a choice on how you respond, and like helping my mom, people who don't have the tools still utilize the tools. Well,
and it's cool that you are allowing them to empathize without, because I think the reason we villainize is to set boundaries. We want, like, I want to be able to do my art project the way I want to. So I have to villainize that you're ruining my art project.
You have to be a bad person.
So that I can set the boundary there. And what you're teaching your kids is you can empathize and have your own sense of self. Yeah. You can actually see things from grandma's side and understand her and love her and care about her and still color the project. And I think that that's one of the main reasons we villainize.
Yeah. Couple of thoughts. One, I can't help but think about how often our expectations create such cataclysmic problems for us inside. Because every conversation about where the pain exists, it's like, expectation, unmet expectation. And I think that for us, even in being able to lessen the amount of pain that we have and communicate it, is realizing like, how many expectations have I brought to this thing that weren't communicated well, and that I had in my head that were terms and conditions that maybe someone else didn't have as terms and conditions. And how do I adjust my expectations? Like, I don't think we're really taught really well how to hold our expectations loosely and how to grieve them well and how to adjust them well in our journey. And I think that plays a huge role in being able to get resolution in situations like this. I did one other thing, or did you want to make a note on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was thinking about this, like when these transitions happen, especially within couples relationships, I am very traditionalist in the idea that a man is meant to lead the home. But that leadership to me is defined as modeling. It's like, I am like, I want to lead by being a model. So if I want to see more compassion or kindness or understanding inside of my household or my relationship, I'm going to have to take the reins and begin to implement that within myself. And I think in a lot of relationships, you have couples where no one has any idea who's leading the situation. And each person's waiting for the other person to rise up and show up and be an expression of what we want, rather than going like,
you're saying each person's waiting for the other person to lob it, as in the tennis match that Jenna was saying.
Nice
like,
and soft.
Right. And to do it well, rather than for me, I think that there's something for us as men, like where there's an invitation for us to be those leaders of a household and go, my wife might not know how to do this. Yeah. And I don't even know how to do this right now, but I'm going to be the one that chooses to like not sit passively hoping that she can figure it out, but actually initiate inside of myself, regardless of whether my kids get it or my wife gets it. I am going to be the one that is going to pay a price to model this situation until this is the culture of my environment. And I think a lot of us men have veered into that passivity.
100%.
And not knowing what it looks like to lead, because leadership looked like domination for so long. And so leadership looks ugly inside of those situations. It feels like a gross word. But instead of it being domination, it actually being a reflection of the very things that we want, I think that that changes the game for everyone if someone will show up like that.
Yeah. You know, the husbands, lay your life down for your wife like Christ did for the church. Like there's no bullets flying around that I have to jump in front of for Jenna. And so I'm like, rarely do I have to quote unquote lay my life down in such a physical way that it sounds way more badass to do than to go, I'm going to listen and not defend myself until she feels like I totally get where she's coming from. And way harder. I'd rather take a rain of bullets.
Me too. Punch me in the face.
Oh my
Please,
gosh.
get it over with.
Yeah. Well, and this
That's
when we do marriage coaching with people, we describe the concept of being defenseless, and actually, like, your goal is connection here, not for one of you to go, yep, I was wrong. Like, that's not what we're going after.
No.
We're going after connection, but one of you has to start. Like, you can't go like, okay, we're both going to listen really well at the same time. Go.
Yeah.
You have to have one person. And that is probably the most like sacrificial thing I think anyone could do, is go, it's telling your nervous system, yes, the mouth of the lion is right there, seemingly. And I have to be willing to be eaten here in order to this is just what your nervous system is feeling.
Yeah.
But I have to be willing to set myself up to be hurt in order to help them feel heard. And so I'm going to lay down the defenses, which I think is like the essence of vulnerability.
Yes.
So it's not just a vulnerable speaker, it's a vulnerable listener by going, I'm not going to put up my shield while you're potentially lobbing stuff at me.
Yeah.
And that's probably the most Jesus-like thing you can do, which, therefore it's probably one of the hardest things you can do.
really
It
hard.
really is.
Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I really like that, being a vulnerable listener. I think that articulates a concept that is very, very hard. But sometimes even when I just have key phrases like that, it can help me switch my energy from like, oh, I'm being guarded. How do I get back to being vulnerable? Like, how do I get back to being open towards connection and hearing this person? Compassion and empathy break down all of the divides. Always. And I love even that you're teaching your kids that you guys can disagree and have compassion and empathy.
Yeah.
But the idea is, as a listener, I get to be as powerful as the speaker.
Yeah.
Like, both of us get to choose. Are we going to be vulnerable? Choose
good.
Curiosity instead of contempt. Are we going to choose to seek to understand and love instead of protect and defend? And it is hard. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think I forgot it, but it had to do with like, okay, a vulnerable listener is not having a situation happen to them.
Yeah.
So we're not suddenly a victim. We get to happen to the situation through choosing to engage in that vulnerability.
Yeah.
It's not like I just have to put up with this and be on the receiving
it's not
end.
a
You can still
doormat.
set boundaries.
Right. Yeah. And it's even in the vulnerable process of like, no, I'm choosing to take something inside of me that wants to defend. This is a powerful, proactive action for me to choose to lay down my defenses and engage in love towards a situation.
Yeah.
And even sometimes I use boundaries inside of that. I'll be like, I really want to hear you.
Yeah.
And the way that you're talking, I'm having a really hard time not getting defensive.
Right.
Is there any way that you could tell me about what you're feeling
Yeah,
right
yeah,
now? Because that helps me.
Yeah.
Like, I want to listen well for you.
Yeah.
This would be helpful if you have the capacity.
And
Okay.
sometimes I do that with if someone who can't hear that, I'm just like, oh, that sounded really scary. I'll just reflect back the emotion. And it's almost like you do it off, not like, obviously it can't be too much, subtly enough that they engage. It almost helps them pick up the breadcrumbs of their own emotion that they're not into with. Like, it was really scary. Yeah, it did. Yeah, it felt really like I had a ton of fear. Like, I'm sorry. Fear is no fun to feel. Like, that would make sense. I'm so sorry you felt all that fear. So like helping. But it was interesting because I was just thinking about how like a lot of times defensiveness is self-protection, because it's like, oh, I'm going to find safety when all these walls go up. So I'm going to self-protect.
Yeah.
But then actually the irony is that what you're wanting is safety, but then also like to get your needs met of safety. But vulnerability is actually where you're going to get comfort and actually get your needs met.
Yeah.
So you think that you're going to get your needs met over here, but actually like it's lying to you. And the way that you'll actually get the deep need met is by being vulnerable. Like, that's the only time you're going to be known and actually experience comfort is if you can take the walls down.
Yeah.
So it's like training, like you said, retraining your brain. Like, that's actually where safety and comfort live. I know you're used to grabbing that, but like, let's grab vulnerability instead of self-protection.
Yeah.
My kids, Audrey, my oldest, will get in the car after school and she has a ton of emotions and they're usually not logical.
That's pretty common for kids after school.
Yes.
They like hold them all
Literally.
day long. They're in there, they're self-protected, they're guarded, and they get home. And then it's actually typically a sign of a level of safety that they can then release all
Yay,
their
we have
emotions.
super secure children.
It makes for such a fun car, right? I do have to do self-talk and picking them up. I'm like, okay, I like almost like clear my plate to catch their emotions and like make sure I have margin to not like go into, you know, internal
spiraling inside
myself as a
yes.
So she'll literally get in the car and say things like, I've been keeping my tears in all day. And like the door's not even closed. And I'm like, okay, let's buckle up. So anyways, I used to probably like, I would listen for a bit, but then be like, oh, you know, like, but can you be that friend? Or maybe she didn't mean that. Or we know that about
troubleshooting mode.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. And it was funny because, anyways, and then she'd get more agitated and it would like, we wouldn't necessarily find resolution. And then, I don't know if you guys have read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People recently, but there's this chapter about being an empathetic listener, but he gives the example of doing it with his kids. And he talked about how he had nailed it with spouse and coworkers or whatever, peers.
Very impressive. If I can ever say I nailed it with the people group, I'll be so excited.
Sorry,
I nailed it.
Yeah.
Justin always feels like I'm an empathetic listener. I will have won the lotto on that day.
That's real.
How about he felt more convicted to with his kids?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I was like, I paraphrased him wrong. But anyways, he was saying how often he would do the defense so that they can feel pain and it means I'm bad as a parent. Therefore, this is me putting it in my own words, like I need to give parental wisdom. Otherwise, I'm not doing a good job or I'm missing a window. So then I was like shutting down and almost like trying to talk her out of her pain or giving her solutions for pain when I wasn't doing that for anyone else in my life, but with the kids. So then I was like, oh, okay, I actually need to do this now in this relationship. So when she's in the front seat, I can connect with her sad and it doesn't mean I'm a bad parent. There's not a limited time with I can listen until I need to sprinkle my parental wisdom. I'm just going to connect with her sad. And it was so cool because we get through it so much faster now. Like it's hilarious to think of like in times past, it's about 15 minutes home. We'd be home and it still wouldn't be resolved.
Absolutely.
And it'd make homework time harder.
Yes.
Now, usually by the second roundabout, which is like 4 minutes from home, she's usually done crying because I don't interrupt her. And it's been cool because she's literally said things like, so like she'll be telling it and I can instantly see some of the flaws in the logic or like, you know, and I'm like, I'll bite my lip sometimes to like, we're listening. We're not trying to change.
That is like the hardest thing, even with adults, when they're sharing emotions that you're like, this is not logical. That is like one of the things I get most angry at. Yes. Where you're like, no, but this is not, none of this makes sense.
So I was like, I'm just listening. I'm connecting with her sad. And she at the end, I think it was literally the first time. I was like, I will give myself permission to experiment. And I'm like, hey, you get to judge it by its fruit. You can't say it doesn't work if you've not tried it enough to see if it makes the fruit you want.
That's great.
So then anyways, at the end, she was like, wow. She just like stopped and she was like, I didn't give her any advice other than basic comfort, you know? And she was like, I feel so listened to. She was like, you understood. Like, thank you, Mom. Like, that was really good. Like literally, I was like, it was like I had asked her to like give me feedback and I hadn't. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I'm doing wrong this whole time. So then of course I don't do it perfectly all the time, but I try to catch myself when I'm like going into troubleshooting mode, reminding like that's not connecting with her sad. I'm actually defending being a good parent or trying to prove to myself I'm a good parent.
Yeah.
So just being able to empathetically listen and watch how it almost just like a balloon that releases the pressure and then she's done. And then I get to give her comfort. And at that point, if there is something I need to tweak, maybe
her brain is actually on at that point.
But also how often, actually, this is cool. A couple times she's been like, but we know Jessica, that's not a real name, is not a good friend, Mom. We've talked about that. So why do I keep trying to play with her if we know this is going to happen? I'm like,
Totally.
So it's been cool how like letting her do that versus like, oh, you don't even actually need me. If I let this play out, it was almost like the internal, like I'm the same thing. The defensiveness was rising, but for parenting weirdly. And I'm like, if I can comfort that, the solutions and connections we get to are so much more valuable.
I love that.
All the brain science with the, all the blood flow into your limbic system, the fight, flight, and you're all amped up emotionally. And so even when you have brilliant parental wisdom,
they're like not hearing any of it.
Yeah, the barely developed part of their brain that could be rational is so offline. And this is true for Jenna and for people in general. Jenna and I, especially, the moment that we feel like somebody is with us in that pain, like suddenly our limbic system goes, oh, hey, we're actually not in danger. We're not in danger. And all the blood flow goes right to back to the front of the head, the prefrontal cortex, where you're smart and you go,
executive function.
Oh, yeah, can you help me figure this out? And then even if it's the same exact advice, the moment we feel known, we are so much smarter.
Absolutely. We can retain it. We can hear it. Yeah. It's not even like people are consciously choosing not to listen when they're emotional. Yeah. it's that brain, that part of their brain isn't activated.
Yeah.
It's literally offline.
Right.
And so if you don't do emotion to like we want to do logic to emotion to calm it down. And I get it. When somebody feels irrational, I want them to calm the F down. And I want to go into logic because that feels safer to me while they're in emotion. But if we can meet them emotion to emotion, it often deflates that. Do you have any examples of just ways that you guys, when your kids are upset, ways that you say things to meet them in their emotions?
Yeah.
One of our kids runs away. Wesley, our 4-year-old, like he does the shame. Like it's interesting how they've all done different, but like Audrey wants to be close, but he does shame and he wants distance. So like some of the things we'll just say like, hey, I want to connect with your sad whenever you're ready. Like, I just want to connect with your sad. So like the taking that you're in trouble or a punisher is waiting for you, like just their expectation with that's how they're going to get met first. Any examples?
Lots of like curiosity questions, like, oh no, what's happening? And like, I try to match their energy. So, you know, when I'm like, what's happening? That doesn't really get them talking, but like, oh no, what's happening? And then they start saying certain stuff. And I literally reflect their words back to them. Many times it's like all they need, especially when they're like, he said this and he did this and he said that and did that and did that. And they're like, yes. I'm like, wow, that after I do some like literal reflection, then I'll go like, that would feel so sad. I start inserting the emotions and that's when they're like, yeah, I feel sad. I feel whatever. Rosie last night, she was like, it's so hard to control my anger. When Audrey was doing that, I was laying in bed and I wanted to be so angry and kick something, but I didn't. I just sat here and she's like, I don't know what to do with all that anger. So I was like, wow, that's a lot of, and so we did some box breathing, 4 seconds in, hold, 4 seconds out, hold, and like all this stuff. And she's like, her being able to identify, oh, this is anger and not somebody needs to be punished. Like teaching the words, like reflecting and then using a lot of emotional words.
I was going to say, you know how they talk about like for sex ed, you should tell them the real words, like penis and vagina. Yes. That's what I feel about with emotions. Cause I hear people say, which I think is great, highs and lows around the dinner time, but we actually do a sad moment and a joy moment, or sometime you feel lonely. So I'll actually specifically ask them emotion questions because I want them, at dinner, in the car. If I'm trying to connect while I'm cooking anything, I don't do or logistics questions. I do more, but I use the real word because I feel like it's like a flashcard. I want them to be like, this is what a lonely feels like. This is what blah, blah, blah feels like. And then they'll come out and like, the other day when I was asking for Rosie about something else, she was just out of the blue, was like, I feel lonely at recess because the kids that anyways, I went off and I was like,
that's amazing.
At 6, you can identify lonely. I'm just catching it right now.
Yeah, me too. 100%.
Please like have that fluency that you grow up with.
That's incredible.
And then we apologize a lot. Like there's times that I go into advice or get angry and I'm like, oh, I didn't do a good job of connecting with your sad. Can you give mommy can I get another chance to connect with your sad? Because I'm watching them get more defensive. I'm like, oh, I missed my move. Like I didn't serve it back the way. So just using that verbiage is helpful too. For
lots of repair, tons of repair, so much repair.
That's good. Yeah. Well, this is such a good episode. I was thinking we could probably break it into like 10 mini episodes because there was so much good content that we covered. That if you're listening out there, you might want to re-listen to this one multiple times because in this episode, we covered so many huge concepts. If you listen to it multiple times, you just start to be grabbing them. And then there are things that will probably take you a few years to unfold and roll out. But I think it's so important for any relationships at work, your marriage, your dating, your kids. It's important to learn these life skills. We can change the world the more we learn to understand our emotions, communicate our emotions, use vulnerability, and let go of shame and defensiveness and learn self-control. That's my recap.
Yeah. And I do want to add one thing, if you notice as you listen, is that you hear Jenna and Aaron repeatedly communicating about how they still don't get it right.
Yes.
And that's like us, Abby and I, like when we're talking about anything we talk about on this podcast. It's about learning how to come alive in the midst of your messiness.
Yeah,
like there is
good.
no arrival
Yeah.
point. Like it's okay if it takes you a few years to get it. It's okay if you like fumble.
A few decades.
Yeah. We're 15 years in and I'm still like, I don't know. So
We
many of
taught
these
emotional
concepts.
health for years, and I'm still learning to recognize my emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh.
So give yourself plenty of grace.
Yeah, that's good.
There's no pressure to get this overnight. And
Sure.
any step forward is a step forward.
Yes.
Plain
So
and
good.
simple.
So good.
Even just deciding you want to hear it and starting to, one of the ways I start to learn things is processing with people. Like listen to this episode, send it to some friends, have a conversation. Just starting to dialogue about things will help you.
And get it introduced to your culture.
Yeah, that's real.
Yeah.
Not being alone and doing it is like so helpful. Like knowing that you said like someone you can go with and you know how they'll show up helps you as you're like training wheels, learning how to do it. You're like, okay.
Yeah.
Well, and you guys had a lot of common language.
Yeah.
So you guys know what it means to say just because you're sad doesn't mean I'm bad.
Yeah.
Like you guys know that. Now your kids are learning, oh, I didn't connect with your sad. You guys have that common language so that you know what it means. And that's one of the reasons we've created the Connected Life is to help create common language inside of families and friends and relational dynamics. So share this with people that you need some common language with, that you're working through some stuff with. If it impacted you, pass it around. That's one of the best ways to get the word out and to impact the world.
Yeah. And to review and subscribe and
share.
Yeah. Rate, review, subscribe, and share. Now for you two, if people are wanting to get a hold of you in any way, shape, or form and know more about you, like, is there anything that you wanted them to know?
Yeah. Check out our podcast, Marriage Lab. And then zintsquad.com is where you
like
can.
Zint is our last name and then squad, like, I don't know, a squad,
Like
a famous squad. Yes.
ZINT
Squad.
Squad.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's
Smart.
where you could like book coaching sessions, but also where you could sign up for Jenna's habit mastery course, which is dope.
When you said
It is
practice, I'm
dope.
like, it's so real. It's all about practicing, forever practicing.
Yes. Yeah. Which we've talked about Jenna's habit. What's it called? Workshop?
Habit mastery course.
Mastery course before. And it is such a great tool to change your life, break down the steps to actually transform. So find her Instagram. Did you already give that?
Jenna Zint. No, I always forget these things because I'm just thinking like we're sitting having a conversation. I'm like, oh yeah. So Jenna Zint is my Instagram.
Yeah. JENNZINT.
JENNA.
Yeah.
I didn't even catch that you still did it wrong.
Honestly, I was still in ADD thinking about how I thought maybe you already gave it, but I was in ADD land and missed it. Like I was like, maybe I jumped out for a second.
No, that's it.
Delightful. Well, we had so much fun.
Thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
thanks for having us.
Come
Yeah.
again.
All right, everybody, go.
That's what he said.
Way. Bye.